In this unit, we're going to focus on cloud data security. So in the previous unit, I talked about all these different concepts with cloud security, and one of them was data security. So we're going to dive a little more deep into that subject in this unit and talk in more depth about data security. So first, we'll talk about the cloud data lifecycle. Then we'll talk about some storage architectures in the cloud. So we want to understand how we store data in the cloud first. And then once we understand how it's stored in the cloud, then we'll talk about some of the strategies we can use to protect that data. We'll talk about data discovery, some of the interesting problems with jurisdiction as far as the cloud goes because of its geography, and sometimes we can't control that geography. We'll talk about data rights management, finally retention, deletion, and then auditing. So those are the subjects we're going to cover in this unit, and we're going to start with the cloud data lifecycle. So the cloud data lifecycle should look familiar. We've talked about the cloud data lifecycle in this class before. So I kind of explain what create, store, use, share, archive, and destroy are from a very generic point of view. But here, if I had to talk about it from a cloud perspective, so when we create the data, it's new data. We begin the classification process when it's created. In other words, we have to know who created it, who owns it, who should have access to it, what the level of sensitivity is for that data, and at that time implement some kind of security controls for that data. Then the data gets stored. It can be stored as files, object storage. It could be in a database. And we're going to talk about those three when we talk about storage architectures. We have redundancy and backup. So we have to think about how we're going to make sure we have that business continuity and disaster recovery, which we talked about last week as well, which we'll talk about again later on in this course. At some point, that data is going to get used. So it's going to be consumed or processed by a user or an application. It could be viewed, moved, stored, processed, etc., all from the cloud. We might share that data. One of the great advantages of the cloud is it makes sharing data a lot easier. It could be used, shared to customers, partners, contractors. And one of the technologies we're going to talk about is data leakage protection technologies, which is DLP. So we'll talk about that in this unit as well. And then finally, we archive the data, which is moving to long-term storage. And if we need to, we might retrieve it and recover it for data recovery or something like that. You're probably saying, wait a minute, there's one missing here. What about destroy? In the previous diagram, there was a destroy. I'm going to talk about destroy later on in this section. When we talk about retention and deletion, we'll talk about destroying, because destroying data in the cloud is a little bit more difficult than destroying it in our own infrastructure, because we lost a lot of that control when we're in the cloud.